Ferrari's 2025 Formula One season hasn't exactly gotten off to the best start. With disappointing performances in both Australia and China, it's been a tough period for the Scuderia. However, there's hope on the horizon, especially with the Japanese Grand Prix coming up. Despite all the troubles they've faced with the SF25, Ferrari is working hard to turn things around this weekend at Suzuka. But you might be wondering, how exactly do they plan to fix their issues with the SF25, especially when it's clear that there are significant problems with the car's current specification? Well, the answer lies in the data they gathered during the Chinese Grand Prix weekend. The good news for Ferrari is that it was a sprint race weekend in China, which means they had an additional race on Saturday and more data to analyze. You might think that having a sprint race weekend could be a disadvantage, with all the additional pressure and challenges it brings, but it's actually given Ferrari an opportunity to understand their car better. Let me explain why this is so important. When you have a sprint race, the car has to run in two very different fuel loads. For the sprint race on Saturday, the car runs with about 35 kilograms of fuel. However, for the main Grand Prix race on Sunday, the car runs with 100 kilograms of fuel. This difference in fuel load is crucial because it affects the way the car handles. The lighter fuel load for the sprint race allows the car to behave differently than it would in the main race. Essentially, the car is less burdened by the extra weight during the sprint, which means it can perform differently across different types of events. Ferrari's analysis of the data from the sprint race and the full race has given them key insights into how the SF25 performs at different fuel loads. This data has been critical in helping them identify some of the weaknesses in the car. What Ferrari found was that the SF25 behaves differently when it's running with a full fuel load as opposed to a lighter load. When the car runs with 100 kilograms of fuel, they discovered that it causes some serious problems, especially with the car's rear suspension. This is the part of the car that has been causing issues in terms of stability and overall performance. The suspension simply isn't able to handle the heavier weight, and it's pushing the car out of its optimum working window. Let me break this down further. Essentially, what Ferrari is facing is that their current rear suspension setup is not stiff enough to cope with the extra weight of the full fuel load. The car needs a stiffer suspension to keep the aero platform stable when carrying more fuel. In simpler terms, the rear suspension is being overloaded, which is affecting the car's balance and performance. This issue has been a big part of Ferrari's struggles, and they've seen it crop up in other races like in Australia and China. In fact, we saw the full extent of the problem during the race in China, where the car's performance dropped significantly when it was in race trim with a full fuel load. The good news is that Ferrari believes they've figured out what needs to be done. After analyzing the data from both the sprint race and the main race in China, they believe they have found a solution. The team has been running simulations and using the data they've gathered to work out a better setup for the SF25. They hope that by stiffening the suspension and adjusting the car's overall balance, they will be able to keep the car within its optimum working window even when it's running with a full fuel load. This setup is expected to improve the car's performance, making it much more competitive in the upcoming races, including the Japanese Grand Prix. But as always in Formula One, there are no guarantees. While Ferrari is hopeful that the new setup will work, they won't know for sure until they hit the track in Suzuka. The team is still in the process of fine-tuning the car and testing the new setup, so there is an element of uncertainty going into the weekend. But Ferrari has the tools, the data, and the expertise to make these changes, and if anyone can turn the car around, it's them. One of the biggest factors that could impact Ferrari's ability to test this new setup is the weather. Suzuka is known for its unpredictable conditions, and there's a 50% chance that the Japanese Grand Prix could be affected by rain. So with all that in mind, what can we expect from Ferrari at the Japanese Grand Prix? Well, first and foremost, it's going to be a crucial weekend for the team. They've had a rough start to the 2025 season, and this is their chance to turn things around. If their new setup works, we could see Ferrari back in the fight for podiums and possibly even wins. However, if the setup doesn't work as expected, it could be another frustrating weekend for the team. One thing is certain, though, Ferrari won't be going down without a fight. The team has always had a strong legacy in Formula One, and they're not going to give up just because they've faced a few setbacks. They've got a talented group of engineers, drivers and team members, and if anyone can get the SF25 back to its best, it's Ferrari. Now, let's take a moment to talk about the car's setup more generally. In Formula One, the setup is everything. Teams spend countless hours in the simulator, tweaking every aspect of the car to get it as close to perfection as possible. This includes adjusting things like the suspension, aerodynamics, tire pressures, and even the driver's seat position. Every small change can have a significant impact on the car's performance, and even a slight improvement in one area can make all the difference over the course of a race weekend. Ferrari's approach to car setup has always been meticulous, and they're putting in the work to make sure they get it right. The data they've gathered from the sprint race and main race in China is incredibly valuable, and they're using it to adjust the car's balance and improve its overall performance. While the setup changes they've made are important, the real test will be how the car performs on the track in Suzuka. If Ferrari's adjustments pay off, we could see a much more competitive SF25 in the coming races. But Ferrari's challenges aren't just limited to the car's setup. There are also questions about the team's strategy and how they will manage their race weekend. In Formula One, strategy is just as important as speed and making the right decisions at the right time can be the difference between finishing on the podium or falling behind. Ferrari will need to make sure they have the right tire strategy, pit stop strategy, and race pace to ensure they can capitalize on any opportunities that come their way. Looking ahead, it's clear that Ferrari has the potential to turn things around. They've been facing challenges, but they've also been making progress. The data they've gathered, the new setup they're testing, and the team's determination to succeed all point to the possibility of a strong weekend at Suzuka. However, there's still a lot of uncertainty, and we won't know for sure how the SF25 will perform until the cars hit the track. In conclusion, the Japanese Grand Prix is shaping up to be a crucial race for Ferrari. They've had a difficult start to the 2025 season, but they're doing everything they can to rectify their issues and get back into contention. The team's work in the simulator, the setup changes they're making, and the lessons they've learned from the sprint race weekend in China could give them the edge they need to be more competitive. However, with the unpredictable weather conditions and the